Welcome to Taking a Walk, an excursion to converse, connect, and catch up at a cool location with some of the most interesting people you can find.
Hey, this is Steve Sweeney. I am taking a walk with my old boss and friend Buzz Knight. And this podcast, you can get it on Spotify and Apple, and I don't know where you can get it, but he'll tell you.
Well, Steve Sweeney, it is so good to be here taking a walk with you, and so great to see you.
Yeah, we're taking a walk at Fresh Pond in Cambridge. Now, the reason I picked this, we could have walked in Charlestown, but, you know, we'd have to duck the gunfire and so forth. No, I'm kidding. So Charlestown is where I actually grew up, which I love, but I also, my imagination, where we are in Fresh Pond, Cambridge, was actually the country to me. And I used to come over here as a young guy, maybe 16, 17, 18, and it was the hippie era, and my life was full of dreams, and I've always had a great connection to this Fresh Pond. So that's why we're here, and sometimes I still come over and run, but as I get older, the track here looks longer and longer, but as you can see, it's very beautiful and quiet and peaceful, and I love it.
It is. It's a great spot. I have driven by this area, you know, many times before, commuting, that dreadful word commuting, which I don't miss, which we can talk about, but I've never walked here, so I'm really appreciative to be taking a walk with you here. And
well, I want to go back with you. I remember when I got the call, I was doing stand-up comedy and acting, which is how I began anyway. But I had done a lot of guest shots on Jerry Williams and so on. And I got the call from you, and Charles Laquadera, who was a radio legend, and you called me to do a show with Ty. I'll never forget it. It was so exciting. And then we practiced the show, and then about a month before we were going to do it, you said, by the way, is it going to be a problem getting up at 3:45? And of course, you know, you want the job and it's exciting to do radio, and of course you say no, but in my mind I'm saying, holy shit, he's got to be kidding. And you know, I managed to like do it. I have to say, I never got actually used to it. And then I asked Lauren and Wally over at your other station, ROR.
yeah,
And I was on the air maybe 4 years doing morning radio, and I said to them, and they were, at the time they were doing it 20 years. And I said, when do you get used to this? And do you know they both said they never got used to it?
yes.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and I took a walk with Wally at Walden Pond, and he still gets up early in the morning. He doesn't get up at 4 in the morning, but he gets up at 6 in the morning. His body clock doesn't allow him to sleep.
You know, I got to tell you, because I have so many great memories of that show, but I remember like the highlight of my week, even though I love doing the show, was Saturday, because I'd look at the clock and it was like 4, you know, and I'd say, oh, I don't have to get up. And it was like ecstasy. It really was.
Yeah.
It was like the greatest thing. It's just like, you know, do you play golf?
I've never played golf in my life, believe it or not.
It's like you enjoy golf more when you have a job and, you know, or whatever your leisure activity is.
Yeah.
But sleep was a real issue. But for me, being a recovering person, it was a real triumph for me, because I'm coming up on like 30 years of being clean and sober. And
Congrats.
what I used to say is, like in my cocaine years, I say, 3:45, I would be up, but I'm not getting up. I would be up. But I can't imagine like going in there, and then you can't speak, then you can speak, and your jaw's all over the place. And so it was like a real, that was the biggest challenge, getting up. But I have so many great memories of doing morning radio one of the great interviews was, I got to interview Carlos Santana. And at the end, he's supposed to say, "You're listening to Sweeney's Neighborhood." And it was so funny, Buzz. I said, "Okay, you have to say, this is Sweeney's Neighborhood." He said, "Okay, Dweeney Neighborhood." No, I said Sweeney. "Okay, Dweeney Neighborhood." I said, "No, Sweeney." "Yeah, Dweeney." And then another interview, I remember that, you know, I was interviewing kind of my heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So I interviewed Mark Knopfler. And I said, "Listen to this lyric, this is great, whatever." And he says, "Yeah, that's not bad." I said, "Mark, you wrote it." But, you know, I guess that's what happens with these guys. You know, they write so much great music and sometimes they forget. Like, I have people tell me about lines that I wrote. I say, "Wow, that's a good line." I say, "Well, that's you. You wrote it. It was 20 years ago." But I come over here and I've been able, Buzz, to for 40 years work like in creative work, you know, like acting or writing or stand-up or radio, whatever. I mean, it's been an amazing thing. I got addicted to being creative, and to be able to have made a living doing it, it's just remarkable.
So when did you first really discover that that's where your heart was, you know, the creative path? What was the light that went on that signified that you knew, you know, you were headed that way?
When I was 19, my brother called me. I'd never acted before, and my brother was an actor up at Smith College. And I went up and I got on stage, and I started emoting. Now, young actors think they're acting when they're emoting, but there's no craft involved. So it's like you're doing Macbeth, and I got that horrible Boston accent, you know. "Is that a dagger that I see before me?" You know, it's like, you got kids. Have you ever had to go to a school play?
Sure.
It's just awful. Usually,
Yeah,
right?
usually.
You agree?
Yeah, I do.
But I love the whole thing of theater, being a part of it. And then I became a doorman at the Schubert and the Colonial, and I got to see these great artists. And I think the greatest moments for me, I think that's my real love, is theater. I love it all, but theater the most. I was able to see people on stage that were just, I saw Richard Burton do Equus, Christopher Plummer do one-man show of John Barrymore. And the thing that inspired me to do one-person shows was Lily Tomlin's one-woman show, Gilda Radner, Jack Lemmon. I was the doorman for Jack Lemmon. And he would come up after, he did a play, something My Father's, whatever it was, and he was remarkable. You know, you never really see an actor till you see them on stage. Just like a comedian. You see him on TV, that's not it. But after the play, he would come up and play the piano, and just all these beautiful people. There was a play called The King and I, and Yul Brynner. He was like a complete prick, you know.
He was, really?
Oh yeah, he had a big voice, and he started in the circus, and he had all these superstitions. So the whole theater had to be painted brown, and he'd never whistle in the theater, and he's breaking everybody's balls. So the stagehands would go by his dressing room and whistle. "Oh, who is whistling?" You know, and all this shit. But it was such a wonderful world. You know, I loved being from Charlestown, but theater really opened up this whole world for me. So I think that's where I got the bug.
Do you remember the first time somebody told you a story? Because you're such an amazing storyteller, and that you must have been influenced by someone in that regard.
Yeah, you know what? I'll never forget this guy from Charlestown. This was the hippie era. He was traveling all over the world, and he was in Afghanistan before there was all these wars and everything. And he got carpet, and he kind of like smuggled it into Europe. And they said, "This thing is priceless." And I mean, stories, oh my God. I remember stories of, I've always had a fascination with crime. you know, and like, how did they pull this off? How did they pull that off? And I'd hear stories of bank robberies in Charleston. I was kind of fascinated with that. And just all kinds of funny stories. And when I grew up in Charlestown, those guys like Shorty Sullivan and Nippy Nolan and Huey O'Donnell, they would play softball and dive into home plate and everything. And you'd hear the story of the game. And it was, as a kid, that was as big as Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, whatever. Sports stories, crime stories, traveling stories, you know. Ray McLaughlin, who was the stage manager of the Boston Symphony. I worked as a stagehand for a while. This is many years ago. They went to China, and he would just stand in a corner. He's a white Irish guy, and he said 1,000 people would form around him. They had never seen a white guy, you know. How about you? You're interested in stories.
Yeah, I feel like stories start really, you know, with parents telling stories. You know, and many times these are things that are passed through, you know, generations before them, and they're always stories that certainly there's poetic license put in to make them a bit more crazy or funny, but I think storytelling...
Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay, what were the stories your parents told you?
Well, there would usually be stories about, you know, like, for example, my uncle, right?
Family stories.
Family stories.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, and Uncle Fred, actually, he would tell a story about this co-worker of his named Big Red Wilson, right? Yeah. And he said he would always talk about Big Red, but the story was always how Big Red could fall asleep anywhere.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
And Big Red, he said, he actually, I swear to God, he would fall asleep standing up. And you know that's not true, but it just paints a picture that you never forget. So I think at the heart of stories come, you know, where parents sort of passed them down, I guess, you know. But now, were your parents funny?
Yeah, no, I don't know. They were, sometimes my mother was funny and she didn't know she was funny. She would talk about us while we were sitting there, you know. She'd say, I'm not gonna clean, let them clean. Jesus, let them cook, I'm not cooking. Let them eat the potato salad, and we're sitting there, you know.
You're right there.
Talking about us.
Yeah.
But one of the stories that really got me about my mother, like your mother, lived to 102.
Yeah.
And she said her mother and other people in Ireland, she kind of like didn't know how to tell a story, but she would give me the facts. She said they wouldn't even let us learn English and all this stuff about growing up in Ireland, you know. But the county she came from was Cork, which produced by percentage the most guys in the Irish Rebellion. So, you know, there was a lot of hidden stuff. But boy, when I went to Ireland, did I learn about storytelling. Jesus, every frickin' rock has a story behind it. You know what was great when I was over there? It's probably changed, but maybe not. When I was over there, which I've been 4 times, there was no television in the bed and breakfast, and there was no television in the pub. And I'd walk in, and I didn't realize how addicted I was to it.
No, I walk up first.
Oh. I didn't realize how addicted I was to it. And you'd walk in the room and say, like, automatically, where's the television, you know? So...
Well, let's talk about this for a second. That's a topic.
Yeah,
so
okay.
you triggered something here, and I heard a report just as I was driving in about the terrible addiction that is going on with the, certainly not just the youth, but the youth of today, with device addiction, screen addiction. What's your take on devices? Have they helped or have they hurt, I guess?
We'll walk all the way around that thing. Is that okay?
Yep. Because I think it's a terrible problem.
I have a wonderful nephew who I'm very proud of. As a matter of fact, he just got nominated for a Grammy. He's a musician. His name is Tim LaFave, and I hadn't seen him in 2 years. We went for lunch. He brought his phone. We started talking. He looked down at it. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, it's just something on Instagram." I said, "Put it away." He said, "What?" I said, "Put the phone away. I'm your uncle. You haven't seen me in 2 years." And he said, it wasn't some heavy argument or whatever. He said, "Well, you do it." I said, "No, I don't. If you notice, I never take the phone to dinner or the golf course, or like even right now, you said you'd be in front of the building. That's it. You know what I mean?"
Yep.
So, yes, I do think it's an addiction. As a woman walks by us looking at her phone.
Yep. Which, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think when you take a walk, and you're enjoying either the company of somebody or you're enjoying the place that you're at, I think it's a terrible thing when I see people's heads down, not enjoying the day or enjoying the person. It frustrates me.
What I find really annoying is, like, I'll be in a bank, which is an enclosed space, and the guy will be on the phone. "Hey, you offered him $5,000. It's like, I don't want to be invited into this conversation. Look at this puppy. Oh my God.
Oh, I know.
Hi.
Hi.
Morning.
Oh my God. 6 weeks.
He's actually about 4 months.
I was going to say that.
4 months, yeah.
Oh my God.
Found Kiwi before.
Yeah, I find it, some families are more addicted than others. But I did a gig. I did Joe Rogan's, let's sit on the bench here.
Yep.
I did Joe Rogan's podcast. And he said, "Why don't you do a gig with me at the Improv?" So, as a side point, it was easy doing the radio. Now I have to work at the Improv. Now I'm working. Now I have to get tensed up and everything.
Yeah.
But I go to the Improv. You can stand if you want. I don't mind sitting in the wet. But the Improv takes people's phones.
Oh.
And it gives them back to them at the end. Now, what I have to deal with every freaking performance now is people on their phones. It's so fucking rude, and they are addicted, and it's like, I'm calling the babysitter or whatever. I try to be nice about it, and I say to the MC, tell them to get off their phone, But it is not just the kids. See, they don't get it. I've been doing this 40 years. I present a product that I'm really proud of. I built a brand. I'm a performer. And I give the audience the respect of giving them something that's polished and finished, and even though I improvise, something that they would really get into. When I'm looking out and their heads are down, one of the things that's really hard about stand-up is when you're angry, you can be angry, but then it's got to be funny. But sometimes I'm just fucking angry, and I'm at a point now where that's what they see. But I like to be in a really good mood when I perform, and I don't want to be the bad guy, and I don't want to have to explain, "You're being disrespectful to me," not just to me, the other performers. But then the other side of me, when I'm in my normal life, I can really see it. I see it at AA meetings. Like, one of the points in AA is we say, learn to listen and listen to learn. And when people are on their phones, their focus is split. But they're also not supporting the person who's sharing. Because 60% of communication is nonverbal. So when you see somebody looking at you and listening to you, it gives you this certain energy. It's called emotional support. But when you see somebody, they're paying half attention to you and you're pouring your heart out, on a deep level, you're going back to the bar room and you're not being heard. and you're not listening. You know, they're talking over each other or not. Like this kid's on his phone. You know, it's not that I'm immune from this shit. I mean, I can remember getting up in the middle of the night like somebody would get a cigarette and I'm looking at my phone, you know. So, long answer to a short question. I see it all bad. I see it as really bad, except for YouTube, which I like, because I can go back and I can see shows that I grew up with and all that. But ultimately, when you step away from it, you're still looking at a screen. You're not looking at the trees, you know, the water, the stillness.
Yeah, and I think of walking, and why walking I think is important, because it's about a mindfulness in a moment in time. It's the steps and the cadence of it, and I noticed how you know on the Joe Rogan podcast you talk about breathing and you know sort of you know the importance of it. Well, I mean, I think when you take a walk,
oh my God, it's wonderful.
It's an amazing therapeutic change of pace, maybe if you're stuck creatively or if you're angry about something.
Now, do you practice mindfulness?
I do, but I also need to be better at it. You know, I feel like one of the things that...
So what happened to you in Sedona?
So when I went out to Sedona, and
you were a general manager of a radio station?
I was a corporate programmer for the whole company.
And how many stations was that?
64 stations across 15 markets.
Okay, 64 stations in how many cities?
15 cities.
Okay, so when you were off the job, were you able to leave the job off your mind? Or did it like stay with you? Like I work in jails now, I'm able to walk out, but when I was teaching, it stayed with me. So you're out in Sedona, you got 64 stations.
Yeah, and I had gone through a number of things. My mom passed away.
Okay.
So obviously 102, led a great life, but you know, tremendously.
A loss is a loss.
A loss,
yeah.
Man. And additionally, you know, this other family turmoil, let's just call it, was going on in my life. Mm-hmm. And I stopped while I was out there at one of those, you've been out there, right?
Yeah, several times.
One of those places where it's got one of those amazing rock formations that have the energy,
yeah.
You know, that's
vortex, they call it, yeah.
And I went out on the trip kind of uncertain what I wanted to do. And I knew I wasn't necessarily happy what I was doing. Something felt wrong. And I remember it so vividly on one of those vortex moments, and I just came to the conclusion that I wanted to move into another chapter once my contract was over. I greatly loved the work, and I loved the people, and I loved the collaboration and the wins, but I was also living on planes all the time, or
really?
You know, commutes were, I would literally many times, Steve, I would commute to the airport here, and,
right.
and there would be 2 hours of commute to the airport. I would land in Philadelphia, and then I'd be stuck in another 90 minutes of traffic on the you know, airport, you know, on my way to the station. I was just burnt from all of that.
You were burnt out.
You know, and I didn't really want to sacrifice the things, you know, that were important to try to enjoy. You know, I felt like I was. I never wanted to be that person that was just accepting a paycheck. You know, that's not me.
Now, how long ago was that?
That was 3 years ago.
You know, I had this program where I was talking to kids about drugs and alcohol, long story. So I went to Dorchester High School. And one guy, I was just, I was kind of stunned by his openness. He said, I'm burnt out. I'm a burnout. And my brother, who just retired from the Justice Department, he was a federal prosecutor, he says, oh yeah, he had lunch with somebody the other day, and they just said they're burnt out. I remember that feeling when I was teaching I was teaching at UMass, I think, or Suffolk, and I was teaching like 4 classes a day. By the end of the day, in my mind, I'd be speaking, and then in the back of my mind, I'd be saying, will you shut the fuck up? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've had it.
Yeah, the voice in your head.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling being burnt out.
But I never have looked back on my decision. I never once.
Is there anything you miss?
I miss, the people and some of the places as well, because I was doing this for a long time.
Did it feel like a loss when you left at first? Maybe 20% loss, 80% relief?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But I never felt, I've never looked back on it. Now, listen, I won't mention what we've gone through I won't mention the word, what we've gone through the last couple of years, because I'm tired of hearing the word, probably like you. But this thing, over the last 2 years, we know what's happened with people. We're seeing, what do they call it, the Great Resignation. I mean, people are having their own moments where they're stopping and they're sort of going, is this really all there is? And I think the last 2 years have forced that reflection that people have decided, well, I'm not going to...
Well, here's my problem. In my business, show business, success, who defines success? The public defines it as rich and famous. Now, fame is very fleeting. Rich would have been good. I didn't, whatever. But you get into a what would you call it? A mindset of so-called making it, right? So, but then it's generational because new people come along. There's a lot of actors now that are great that are out there, but then there's a lot of actors that used to be big stars, and with luck, they're still working actors. And the thing that's sustaining is, of course, the craft. But it's hard to get out of that mindset of saying, okay, well, I've pretty much already made my mark. For me, I get taken over by projects. Like, I've been, and then the other thing is to be grateful. I've had in the last few years just the most remarkable stuff happening. I just did a movie, Peter Farrelly's next movie. It's called The Greatest Beer Run Ever. It's not about a beer run. It's 1967. It's in New York. This neighborhood is taking the Vietnam, they're sending kids to Vietnam. They're not coming back. So beer is kind of symbolic. So the civilian goes over there. And it's an incredible story, and it's a true story. So I did this movie, and Peter is coming off an Academy Award, Best Picture with Green Book and screenwriter and everything. And everybody wanted to be in this movie. And the cast, he called me up. He said, well, Viggo Mortensen's out, but Russell Crowe is in. Not bad, right? The part I was up for, Bill Murray got. So my scene is with this guy, Zac Efron. So I get there on the set, and this is how the universe works. It's like your trip to Sedona, the reason that you went there could have been somebody you were sitting in the plane next to and say, oh, that's why I'm here. So I walk on the set, and I lost friends in Vietnam, and they've recreated Vietnam. I said, wow. So this was the good things that have happened in my life and the bad things. None of them were planned for. So this was just this gift from the universe, and I'm doing this one-man show about growing up in Charlestown called Townie, and Peter is the executive producer for the film of it. The earlier stuff I said about making it and all that shit, everything goes away when I'm on a project. And then I think, wow, this is it right here, this moment. This is it. And I get in a zone with another actor. So for me, I have to unlearn what the society has given to me, what's success, the fame I've had, I fucking hated it. I liked, when people recognize you for your work, that's great. But when people come up to you and they want to tell you jokes, all that shit, it's a nightmare. So, did you feel that when you left? Like, okay, giving up the big job? It was some prestige, right, in that job? Some power, whatever.
For sure. And there is, the ego.
Do you feel like you've made your mark?
I still grapple with that question. And here's where I go with it, because let's take the podcast, Taking a Walk. It's something I love doing, meaning walking. It's conversation and interviewing I love. And so
what if not one fucking person listens to this?
You know what? I probably will be devastated.
Really?
But on the other hand, if 6 people listen, I've made 6 people happy.
But right here, right now, we're having a good conversation.
That's correct.
So that's what I get out of it. When I was on the set of this movie, that's it. That was the experience. I did a show in jails, right? So I had this, it turned it into a TV show. We pitched it didn't happen, but I knew when I performed for those guys, they were so fucking grateful and everything. I said, this is the moment. I felt it, I knew it. This is the moment.
Well, you're nailing it, because I think I mentioned to you I interviewed Dan Shaughnessy for the podcast about his book on the Larry Bird era of the Celtics.
Yeah.
And it's a great book, and in the book you start remembering where you were yourself following this.
Right.
And that moment in time was an amazing moment, and you don't always realize when you're in a moment that it is the moment, and it is an amazing moment.
When I was younger, I did Letterman. I did all these things, HBO with John Candy, all this stuff. And I saw a great interview with Bill Murray. And Charlie Rose asked him, he said, you did all these movies, this, that. And Bill Murray said something very profound. He said, yeah, I wish I was there. He was not present. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think...
So they say with age, I disagree with that. I think it's with consciousness, with concentrating on where you are. I'm enjoying it all more now. I enjoy my work.
Well, so I enjoy, like I said, interviewing,
Who have you interviewed that really sticks in your head, like over all the years? Because you were in radio as a broadcaster.
I was on the air. I would say Jerry Seinfeld, which was such a...
I worked with him. I love Jerry Seinfeld.
Such an amazing... Some people say, oh, he wasn't great. I'm like, he was great with me. So I love comedians. That's why you and I hit it off, because I just have such an appreciation for comedians. But I would say many of the comedians, whether it was Dana Carvey, Jerry, and then some of the unsung ones, were so incredible. At that moment, I think they were sort of unsung, like Larry Miller.
I remember Larry.
Right? Yeah. So the comedians were great.
What about politicians?
Interviews.
Who'd you interview for politicians?
I would say the one that comes to mind is, remember John Kasich, who ran for president?
Yeah, I do remember him.
John was, when I was in Ohio, we sort of became friends, and he was a big music fan.
Yeah.
Went to a Bob Dylan concert with him, and he loved talking about music, and I would go, hey, what's Tip O'Neill like? You know what I mean? I would want to hear some, inside story. Can I designate you the first 2-part Taking a Walk guest right now? And can we?
Sure.
Let's do a tremendous tease. I want to hear the first time you met the Farrelly brothers when we come back to part 2 of Taking a Walk.
Sounds great.
Taking a Walk with Buzz Knight is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.